Faith Over Breakfast. I am at the Village Church, sitting across from Andy Littleton. We're in Tucson, Arizona, and Andy Littleton is the pastor of Mission Church.
And you are Eric Siepen,
the pastor of the Village Church.
Yep.
And we had an interesting conversation today.
Yeah, we meandered in all the right ways. These are the type, if you want to know, if you care, that we enjoy the most. I think we just had a great. We enjoyed our conversation.
We did.
Hopefully you do too. Let's see. What did we touch on?
Sports
and activism.
Yeah, we talked about
sports in general.
We talked about our podcast being ranked number 16 as the whatever the category was
on the Billboard charts. Yeah.
We were.
And there were so many, I think, interesting rabbit trails. Personally, I think we are not representing it well. There's so much that comes into this from all different angles. So enjoy. And as we always say, this is us. We both had a coffee. We don't plan this. This is you getting to sit down like it's like we just had you over for. We told you, hey, we're meeting at McDonald's in this case, unfortunately. And, hey, we got a couple extra seats at the table. Come sit with us. So this is us working it out, not the views of our church per se.
It may not even our own views.
Maybe not even.
We're just working them out.
Which if you get to the end, you'll learn. This is us. We're thinking. We're thinking things through. We want to invite you into that kind of conversation. I think it's scary as pastors to do that because you want to have all the right info and you want people to hear you and go, now I know what to do. And we're inviting you into a space that's more vulnerable than that, where we just are trying to talk it through, thinking it out.
Cool. All right. Well, see you next time. All right, hey Andy, how you doing?
Hey, I'm all right. It's interesting because in this case we've Faith Over Breakfast privately for a while, and now we're going to do that publicly. So I think that's good.
It's good.
We've said our hellos. We've checked in.
Yeah,
you really checked in with me this time.
Yeah,
which is often what happens. I'm afraid.
You check in with me sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was. The other day, sometimes I get bored. I put my name in quotes in Google to see what's there. And one of the things
this is the great Google your name. Let's
Google your name. But here's my justification for it.
Okay.
It's kind of like journaling because all of the things that come up is obviously things that are about from my church and my YouTube channel and all that kind of stuff. But comments that I have made on other people's websites over the years also come up. So then I'll go back and read them, and I'm like, I don't remember saying that. I don't remember writing that.
Who was that guy?
I remember being really upset and posting that.
Oh, boy.
Or trying to articulate something. And so that's fun to just go through those memories. But I came across something, maybe 2 pages in, and the title was The Top 20 Podcasts to Listen to in 2020.
Oh, yeah.
So
was this the one we saw before?
No, this is not the one we made a big deal of. That was in 2019.
Oh.
This is the 2020, and it was in, I think, January is when they put it out.
Wow.
And so we are number 16.
Wow.
On this podcast.
Not even at the bottom.
We are not at the bottom.
Was this the same person that did
No, this is a different group. I posted it on our Facebook page.
Oh, wow.
And it's obviously the Christian podcast. So some people on that podcast are people like Mark Driscoll. He's a few ahead of us, but also with the not the Willow Creek guy, but the other one in California, the other big mega church.
Oak Creek.
Oak Creek, River Creek,
Walnut Creek.
These
are actually all churches. Just
you
put a tree in front of a creek.
What's the guy's name? I always forget his name.
I don't know any of these.
The Purpose Driven Life.
Okay, Rick Warren.
Rick Warren. Yeah, he's
Which
the
is Saddleback.
number one podcast is his particular personal podcast. You should listen to that. But, there's one called Son of a Pastor, which I've heard of before.
Okay.
So that was,
What's the origin of the phrase son of a gun? What does that mean?
I have no idea.
Okay.
We should look that up.
Yeah, I think that'd be really good.
Son of a pastor.
I know what that
might
means.
be a good insult.
Yeah. Maybe more than, yeah.
You son of a pastor.
You are a son of a pastor. No, I'm not.
Don't say that to me. Oh, my poor son.
Yes. That's why I don't have one.
Yeah.
Just a daughter. Daughter of a pastor doesn't sound nearly as bad.
No, not as bad. So anyway, you know what?
Okay.
We've been doing this podcast for how long?
I don't know.
Long time.
Yeah.
This is our 130th episode.
Stop. Really?
So we have
That's
done
it?
130 episodes. I think that's pretty good.
That's good.
And we average anywhere from 70 to 100 listeners.
Oh, thanks, friends.
So thank you for listening to us all over the world.
Wow.
And
Japan.
I think what that means when we say that is that somewhere from 70 to 100 people listen to one podcast, but that's not the same 70 to 100 people.
Ooh, so
we have a bigger
potentially
audience.
Millions.
Yes, could be. I mean, I'd say at least we have potentially 6 billion people who could be listening to Faith Over Breakfast at any time.
To think we've come so far.
We have come very far.
And somehow I'm getting McDonald's for breakfast these days.
You've gone downhill on that.
Yeah.
But
your theory, by the way, earlier was that as our quality of podcast has risen, my quality of breakfast has declined.
Yes.
And I think you're right.
Well, even I was telling my wife a couple days ago, or maybe it was a week ago, I'm like, oh, man, at XO, they have the best maple scones.
Yeah,
and
good food.
And I used to call them Gibraltars. They changed the name to Cortados, right?
Yeah, people will go back and forth.
But I like Gibraltar. And,
yeah.
And to get that and that maple scone, oh my God.
It was good times.
It was good times.
The trouble is that we're podcasting, about 2 minutes from our respective homes.
Yes.
And if I were to go to a place like XO, it would become a 20-minute trip to get here versus swinging by the only place in between here and there with a drive-through.
Right.
Which is old McDonald's.
Old McDonald's. So what we need is somebody every Tuesday morning to commit to come here at about 4:30, start making the scones, getting the bakery ready, putting together some good coffee freshly.
Listen here. Some folks have been complaining about 2020. They don't have a lot to do. They feel like they're isolated in their homes. Right. They don't have anything meaningful to do. Well, here's an option.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. You can make breakfast here in this kitchen. Be a creative outlet for you. You could be socially distanced.
Yeah.
And we will eat that.
We'll be happy to eat it.
And then we could talk about the great food
that you cooked.
Yeah. Whew. I think we're onto something.
I think we are.
Okay. Good. So we're ranked by somebody.
Somebody ranked us.
Thank you.
And do you know why I think we get ranked?
No.
It's because it's not like you and I are popular pastors in the sense of you don't have a book deal. You did put together a book, but it was your own deal.
Look, here's the deal.
You made a deal.
There's a book deal.
Right.
I'm doing another book's coming out.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What book is that?
It's called Part-Time Pastoring.
Part-Time Pastoring.
Yep.
Wow, you're just so cool.
And there's a deal because I'm writing it with a friend of mine, and he and I talked about that, and we kind of came up with a deal. So I think there's a book deal.
With someone?
Yeah.
Same publisher or different publisher?
Different.
Cool. Who are you publishing with?
Sean Benesh.
Oh, good old Sean. He's got his publishing company back,
huh? No. He...
Oh, you're writing it with him?
Yes.
Oh, and he's got a bit of a name.
Well, yeah.
He's written a few
My
books.
name's longer than his.
It's true.
If you think about it.
So we do have a book deal, and now I know why we're popular. You have a book deal. Congratulations.
You should have a book deal. Here's the thing. Why am I writing books? It's just, I wrote the one because it was meaningful to me. And then the second one is I've had conversations with Sean about being, bivocational and such and what church planning could look like. And we decided to kind of put this together as a team and see how that goes. But you have more worked out deep thoughts than me. Let's be honest. You do. Just listen to this podcast. It's evident.
Yeah.
One of us is goofing off, and one of us has a lot of deep thoughts.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well, okay.
I do have some worked out thoughts, and
So why aren't you writing books, man?
Well, because Sean asked me to a long time ago, but I have a problem.
Oh,
I have a pretty pronounced learning disability that makes writing very difficult.
so it's the writing of it. What could you dictate?
I have attempted to do that. It is very difficult to put it into book form because the editing also presents a problem for me.
So I hear this is what my buddy Nick, who just released his book here in town, More Than All the Steps from New Herald Publishing, Nicholas H. Lang.
More Than All the Steps.
More Than All the Steps.
Can you just give me a 2-minute? What is this book about?
I reviewed it on Amazon. Go check it out.
Oh,
I will. I'll give you a two minute. Nick, it was written. The backdrop, I would say, of it is his 2 walks on the Camino.
right. That's right.
But it's very much the journey of self-discovery. He went on, I think, with God, with friends, with family, that he processed as he walked. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's
That's
good.
really cool.
And I just got done reading it and I enjoyed it. It was fun. It's especially fun if you know Nick and you can hear his voice in the words. That's the best. So if you don't know Nick and you're listening to this, go listen to an Odd Church podcast from Mission Church. Hear Nick talk a couple times. And then,
because that's all he does is a couple times on this podcast.
No, I'm saying you go a couple times. Don't just do it once. Go a couple times to the podcast and then read the book and imagine this man saying these things. It's great. But what he told me was that he worked with a guy who helps a lot of the local folks publish, especially religious folks. And this guy was surprised that Nick actually wrote his own manuscript, because I guess usually he just takes notes and interviews and just kind of ghostwrites books for people mostly. I guess that's typical. So,
but I'd have to pay for that.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And I don't want to pay for that.
Have somebody else pay for that.
Like who?
Rod. Have Rod pay for it.
Okay, I'll have Rod pay for it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Or somebody at the village.
Because Rod is rich.
Oh, super rich. You see how tall that guy is?
Yes.
Gotta
People
be rich.
pay him money all the time. They're like, oh my gosh, here you go.
Yeah.
You're so tall.
Yeah. What you do, okay, just have Rod tell people to give you money, not ask. Tell
people.
Hey, Eric's writing a book. Give him some money. And they will.
So there
village people who, and I know you are 98% of the listeners of this podcast. Just go ahead and you can Venmo Jedi Pastor at, what is it, Juno.com?
Gmail.
Gmail.com. Just go ahead and hit and Venmo that over. Let's go for $5,000. That'll get this done. We'll get Eric's book published if you guys go ahead and just do that, or set up the GoFundMe. Make sure to share it on the Village's Facebook page, Mission's Facebook page, and Faith Over Breakfast. Whoever does it first gets, in the words of Nick Lang, 10 extra holy points. And there you go. The ball is rolling.
So since we just are going off on the book thing, Sue and I, my wife, have talked about writing a book. She's a very good writer.
Okay.
But
okay. I guess this is an alternative plan.
But she doesn't have the space to actually sit down and put it together. So what we decided to do, especially over COVID, since we don't bring a lot of people in the studio. I mean, you're like a privileged person here in the studio.
Thank you.
You're in the COVID circle of sorts. She and I have been doing a podcast on the model that we use to do discipleship, and we've been dissecting it as a way of trying to work out what we might want to say in a book.
Okay.
So we've started the process.
Cool. I would read this book.
So yeah, well, maybe we'll get there.
Okay. Speaking of
getting somewhere,
it's about time we did that. No. No, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to it. So all this was to say, we're not published, and now I've just made a 10-minute rabbit trail out of that.
And this is, by the way, this is my favorite podcast, and this is what I would listen to, is two guys just randomly chatting about their life.
And this is the type that I'm always like, I don't know if we should put this out there, because why? Because we want to listen to this garbage. But it's not the worst.
You know, it reminds me of listening to radio in the 80s and 90s, because there was no YouTube. But people do this on YouTube. They just sit around and talk, and people are like, oh, that's cool.
Eric, we've stumbled on a segue.
Okay.
This is really good. So everything in me yesterday, I realized my best friend growing up, his dad would put the Cubs on TV, but he liked listening to the radio announcers, so he'd listen to the radio while he watched TV, and he'd mute the TV.
My dad would do that with the U of A basketball.
Yeah. Yep. And so I realized that we don't have cable or anything like that. I realized, oh right, the Cubs were on the radio, and I could just be listening now that the baseball season's back on. I like listening to sports on the radio.
Right.
And you can't go. I'm going to revive radio, and I have this smartphone that plays any radio station from anywhere. I'm just going to start, every time the Cubs are on, I'm just going to turn it on.
That's what you're a Cubs fan.
I was an Oakland A's fan.
Okay.
Massive disappointments connected to that in my childhood.
I bet.
Would watch the Cubs with my friend. Moved to Chicago, went to a Cubs game, and it was magical at Wrigley. And I won a prize with my ticket and autographed Billy Williams baseball. I had the best Chicago dog of my life. Whether it was actually good or not, I don't know, but I loved it. And Moises Alou hit a grand slam, and when I walked away from my seat, a foul ball hit my seat, which proved I should have just stayed in my seat. But it was seriously just the best baseball game experience I've ever had. It was so good. And so I walked away and was like, the A's have no place in my heart anymore. And I'm going to be with my friend Sam and the Cubbies. And then Sam died. And so this is like a remaining thing we would have shared, would have been the Cubs. So if I put time into going to a spring training game or a baseball game, that's who I go watch.
Okay.
So I was like, I'm going to listen to Cubbies games on the radio. And I found the station, it pre-gamed, then it cut it off. I think they're making you pay for it. I think you got to go listen on MLB. Or you got to watch it on it.
Right.
If anybody knows the secret hack or whatever, please let me know, because I'd like to listen to the Cubs on the radio. But, anyway, the radio, listening to the radio, I wanted to listen to the Cubs. I just wanted some sports, man. I'm not like this big sports guy. I just wanted a little reprieve. I just wanted to listen to the crack of the bat, some people talking about things that don't matter at all, and pontificating about all of the meaning of the season and what's going to happen next year. All these things that don't matter.
Right.
I wanted it. And then you wanted to talk about sports and activism. There you go. Our segue.
Wow, that is a good segue. So
I told you.
Yeah, I just ran across this article, and I'll just give the title of the article so people can go look it up. But it says Magic's, not Magic Johnson, Magic's the basketball team. Johnson Isaac explains why he didn't take a knee to wear Black Lives Matter shirt Friday. So he's not choosing to do the typical activism.
Which wasn't typical.
Are you going in and out on your headphones?
Oh, I just got a little fuzz, little fuzz sound. Keep going.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry about me. Am I? There we go. Okay.
You sound fine over here.
Good. It's just my headphones. It's this year typical, right?
Yes.
Like in the past, we would have been going like, there was like the outlier Colin Kaepernick or something we would have said, or somebody would have said, who's kneeling, and now it's the majority is doing this, right?
So it's changed.
It's changed. So all of a sudden, it's the novel thing is not to be kneeling, but to stand now, as opposed to before.
So here's what's fascinating to me. I think it's cool that he gets an opportunity to say, hey, the gospel matters, because that's what he was arguing.
So that's his
thing.
His decision. Look, did he talk about how he came to this? Is it he in a gospel community, Christian community? Is there some like?
He did indicate in the article that he had spent a long time praying about it. And thinking about it. Yeah, that he wanted it to be something that was important.
And it was going to mean something.
And I think probably what the general gist of the article seems to say is that he seems to be saying is like, look, I believe Black Lives Matters. I don't think the organization itself has in mind the things that for Black people totally. And so the connection is not one that I wanted to make. And I think the gospel itself is something that is helpful. And
so he wanted to distance himself not so much from the slogan but from the organization, and he wanted to create a platform in which he could share that the gospel speaks in different ways to this issue than maybe the message of Black Lives Matter.
Right. And I think also so I think there's that, and then I think the other part was I think there's this feeling that he didn't want to separate himself from everybody and like say, and point fingers, but that we're all his idea that I read to you was to sort of, we all have an evil and we all practice that evil, and some of our evil is more visible than others, but we need to understand the grace of the gospel and offer that to one another and actually have a conversation.
Yeah. How but it's an interesting piece in this. Like I'm for, the things he's saying. That's good. It's interesting how it's tied up in America and the moment in which you're pledging allegiance to America.
Right.
The whole, all of it.
Yes.
It's right. Like that is the central. Like if you were to, as James K. Smith speaks of the stadium as a liturgical space, a worship space,
yes,
in which we worship things. What do we worship in the stadium? We worship the athletes and those who are, great and accomplished among us, and there is a flag on the ceiling of what is so great about our society that gives us this amazing athletic experience. That it is America. It is this. I think we worship America, consumerism, and have people who are iconic.
Yeah.
In the stadium. Yeah.
We do. That made me think of a whole other thing that kind of fits into all of this. But before that, I was so what also is surprising to me, and I know that we haven't. I think the NBA just started playing this weekend inside their bubble or whatever. But the numbers are way down from what they expected, and they're projected to be way down.
I'm not saying really to them being down. I'm really that they expected high numbers.
They did.
I think there's a couple things. With the activism, part of what I was getting at with sports and what I was kind of leading into is when I go to sports, and this isn't necessarily good, but when I go to sports, I want to get away from it all.
Yes.
I want a space where it's just about a game, right? And I want to see who wins and loses. It brings people together. I've never felt like when I went to the game, like there was a sense that the Republicans were over here and the Democrats. It's like, no, we're Cubs fans, right? Like we're just Cubs fans, and we're in this space because we just want to see this team that stunk it up for so much of our our lifetimes and our forefathers' lifetimes. We want to see them get another series, and I don't need to worry about the any of the other stuff. So that's, I think, part of where bringing the activism in. Now I see the platform sports has. I understand that. I totally understand it, but I could see where I'd be like, can we just not bring that? Can we have some spaces? Right.
Yeah.
But I'm sure people feel that way about church.
Yeah. No, I think they do.
They definitely do. So that's an internal thing that happens with me. I'm like, I don't want this to be a protest moment.
Right.
But then again, what is that? Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
Come on. You can want it all you want. You can want it just to be this neutral space, but no space is neutral.
Yeah, no space is neutral, and I think we could talk about that. But I think what sports highlight for me, and I guess I would really be interested in a conversation about this and what you think, because there's some people in our church, but there's a particular man in our church that I really respect and love, and I've known him for 20 some odd years.
Yeah, and
he spent 20 years in the Air Force, and a very patriotic person. And when the NFL, I mean, he's also a sports fanatic, and so he loves sports. And so he and I would go back and forth about the Patriots, especially football. He hated the Patriots. As soon as the NFL allowed,
how can you be so patriotic and hate the Patriots?
I know
it's a little bit of a there's an issue in there.
Yeah.
We
can talk about that.
We can have him in someday.
But the thing is, as soon as the NFL let players kneel, he said, I am never watching the NFL again.
Never.
This is somebody who probably spent 3 or 4 hours a Sunday when the NFL was playing watching it. Just stop like that. But he would support any of those people in any other form of activism outside of the national anthem, right?
Yeah, right. And this is and that is a key thing. It's right.
And for him, it has all connected to his military service.
Yes.
And the men that he knows that have died.
Yes.
And
defending this country.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so there's this connection there. And what's fascinating is he was something he was an absolute fanatic about.
Yeah.
And, loyal to his teams. He doesn't even care about the team anymore, and he cut him off. It's done. It's over. Boom. Just like that.
Wow.
And I was so shocked. But I have seen that multiple times when it comes to sports. And I think part of that is at play.
I think it happens with churches.
I do too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Like, this has been my community. I've loved these people. But the minute, like, if you cross this line,
boom, it's over.
It's over.
And there's something about the way, because it's religious.
Yes.
And it's
utterly all religious.
Yes.
Our commitment to sports, our commitment to our country is a religious commitment.
Yes.
Yes. It's not.
So I watched The Last Dance. I'm almost done with The Last Dance.
I've just finished it, and I have Last Dance thoughts.
I lived this.
I
lived Michael Jordan.
Dude, same.
I rooted against him in every single final. And so as I watched this, I had to relive it. Yes. And what I realized is all the emotion was coming back.
I know.
When the Suns got beat, when Utah got beat, when he beat the Indiana Pacers in the Western or Eastern Finals. Like I was angry at him. Yeah. And I was angry, and all that was being stirred up, and I'm like, wow. And
I didn't have the Jordan hatred. He wasn't my favorite. I was really into Reggie Miller. And so I would find myself being for the Bulls sometimes, and I really liked watching Jordan play, to be honest. And
he's fun to watch. Yeah, definitely good basketball.
Obviously, but then like I would flip on him in moments like okay, I kind of wanted to see Reggie Miller take him out, and so yeah. I very much lived this. I mean, man, when he came back and played on the Wizards, I was in Chicago. I went to see one of the few games he played, at the United Center against the Bulls.
Nice.
Like, I got to go to one of those, which was really weird to do.
I bet it was.
And I watched him play baseball in person, which was also very weird. I never saw him play in person for the Bulls. But so yeah, that when I was watching this, it's like, this isn't just like interesting stuff. This is my childhood.
Yeah.
I'm getting, the veil is getting torn back on my childhood, right? Which I'm sure I'm seeing in the locker room. I'm seeing what he's really like. Right. I'm seeing what the teammates are like. Pretty interesting.
Very interesting.
Which is why that, as an ingenious, they released it. They did this. They knew how old we are, and
it's perfect.
It's
perfect.
Marketing at its best.
But what it showed me is that I was kind of re-in-touched, like, with these emotions, a very spiritual experience, the worship that I had as a kid of Danny Ainge, and the worship I had of Charles Barkley, and the worship I had of Thunder Dan, and Dan Marley, Chris Mullins and like all these people had to face him and didn't succeed.
How'd you feel about the Pistons?
Didn't like the Pistons.
Nobody likes the Pistons. Oh gosh, right.
But I liked them when they were beating up the Bulls.
Then you were like, okay,
just knock him down.
Now, an interesting thing, that stuck out to me in that documentary on this topic was when Jordan made his famous comment that Republicans buy Nikes too, or buy, but the point was he gave a large campaign donation to support a potential first African American, was it mayor, congressman? I don't remember. But people wanted him to be vocal and promote him, and he did not, because the stated, what he said, I think he suggested was misconstrued. He didn't mean to just make it all about money, but he didn't want to. I think he didn't want to alienate himself as a star, as an emblem from this, other side of the country. He was like, I want to be their favorite basketball player. I don't want to alienate all of them. That's really tough. It's like, is that amazing because he didn't seclude himself, or is that just utterly selfish? Right. What do you think of that?
Well, I think what he couldn't say what is probably true. I don't have the data to back it up, but 60% of the NBA votes Republican and is conservative. But
are you talking players or owners?
Players.
Probably owners are even more than that.
Yeah, and the owners. It's mostly conservative because they're rich, and they understand that that they're going to be taxed less. It is about money.
Oh, sure. The money and not just for them.
Yes.
For all of us.
Yes. It's always about money. And so and that's kind of what the Conservative Party traditionally presents as lower taxes and more room for business. And these are men who have money to create businesses, and so they want to create as many businesses as they can and be as profitable as possible. Right. And so you want conservatives in office to help you do that. That's how they think. And that's capitalism. And I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying it's not popular. You're not allowed to say that. But here's the other thing I think to be true, and this is why I think the ratings for the NFL and the NBA and baseball are going to be down. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying it's the reality, is that people who watch sports are mostly conservative.
Yeah. And there's a lot of them.
Sports radio, most of their listeners are conservative because conservatives listen to radio. That is a big part of like the genetics of that's been formed over the last 20, 25 years, because that's where the message of conservatism gets out. Because, no, let's be honest, like radio is more conservative. If you want, its bias leans towards the conservative, where television's bias tends to lean towards a more liberal platform. It's just how it seems to have evolved in our culture.
That'd be an interesting thing to explore. How and why.
I'd have to I know that radio is more conservative for sure. I'd have to look at sports radio and see what their demographic kind of.
I would assume it's probably more conservative.
But you listen to the kinds of commercials that these people run. They run the same ones that the conservative radio, sports radio runs the same ads. So I'm assuming they're targeting the same people.
We know who to ask on this. We have a radio guy at our church. We could. Yeah, I'll bet he could give some insight.
Yeah.
But the. Yeah, that's interesting. The other thing, though, I think the whole atmosphere, the COVID situation, like if somebody had asked me, do you think that the ratings are going to be super high when sports comes back with like empty seats or digital fan? I would say no. It's not the same. It's not the same to watch a game in an empty stadium. It's not the same to not hear the roar of the crowd, or and know that you can turn off the TV because everybody's walking out, or that's such a huge piece that we forget, is that the fan participation in sports it's not a small fraction, it's a big portion of what sports are about. So baseball, which is dear to my heart, to me is like maybe even 60%. It might cross the halfway threshold about the people there.
Yes.
Like I want to I want to chat it up with people. I want to go and get my hot dog and sit and I want to people watch.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the actual like data of the sport. It's the whole atmosphere. It's a pastime in community. And you get this sense of camaraderie with those who are going for the same team as you. And when that is gone, like I would expect the ratings to tank just because of that. And then you add in the layer of the activism that's permeating, media and TV is now there too, and you can't even escape. It no longer feels like a reprieve. Right. Then what's the motivation? I feel like those are two major undercuts to the motive. I'm not declaring right or wrong about that. I'm just saying factually, that's just, my visceral reaction is I just want to watch a game with people and community. Outside of that, that's why part of why I was interested in listening to the Cubs on the radio. I don't have to see the stupid empty stands.
Right.
If I can just listen on the radio, I can just hear the play-by-play. That's better than watching it.
Well, and what I have not watched any of the NBA games, but I have watched they put the highlights to the games together and they're about 10 minutes. And what I noticed is that the announcers, they feed off of the energy in the crowd. Yeah. And so they
sound weird.
So dead. It's like watching, if you've ever watched the D League or any of the it's just like that.
Yeah.
And it's not interesting. It's
like going to a game where there's like 20 people there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just not. And the players kind of thrive on.
Oh yeah.
You slam.
Well, this is why LeBron was like refusing to play without fans at one point, right?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, it's a huge element.
Yes. Yeah, it is a big element. So here's what I think, and this is a stat that I know for sure is true. Last month, the United States saved $2.5 trillion. The all of us citizens. That's up 100% from our regular savings rate. We're up to 13% of our income.
Good job, guys.
Right. So I think things, and so our economy that's actually not good for our economy. Right?
It's good for the future.
It's good for the future, but it's not good for now.
Yeah.
And I think things like sports that used to be a big place where we would spend our time, it doesn't seem to mean anything in this time. So I think a lot of our idols are starting to look tarnished, and we can't go around and say, hey, make us feel better, because now even our idols are telling us what we're doing wrong. And I don't go to basketball in a worship sense, an illegitimate worship sense. I do not go to watch Tom Brady throw the football amazingly to tell me anything socially. But it doesn't matter what it is. All I want to do is have this thrill of seeing the impossible comeback happen.
Sure.
I don't want, and I think that when my idol starts telling me what I should think about things, then I'm going to move to a new idol.
Yeah, it's interesting. I too, I mean, maybe more people feel this way than I think. Let's say, I don't know, Anthony Rizzo on the Cubs. I don't really care what he thinks about politics.
No.
Like, I don't have any reason personally to believe he knows any more than me because he's a baseball player. So, yeah, I want to see him, make the amazing catch and field the throw that was uncatchable. Mm-hmm. I want to see him hit that I want home runs. I want, the great triple. I want him sliding into second. That's what I'm hoping for.
Right.
So yeah, but I felt this way for years. People were like, "Oh my gosh, did you see Beyonce came out for, so and so candidate?" I'm like, I don't know. Why would I listen to there are people who know way more about politics, and so that's just been my bent all along. Is I'm like, I don't care if they share their opinion, but I'm not looking for it per se. I understand they have a platform. It doesn't bother me if they do, I guess, but kind of the event itself, like baseball, or if I went to a show or something, it'd be nice if it just.
Well, and that's the thing about so let's talk about activism for a moment, because what I thought was interesting is that Kaepernick when he started, first he was sitting, then he took a knee. He was doing something that nobody else is doing.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, he called attention to himself. He had a voice.
Yeah,
right?
And that was what was powerful about it, was that it wasn't everybody's doing it, which is what's now reversed.
Right.
With Duder, with what's his name?
With Johnson Isaac or something.
Yeah, on the Magic. Yeah.
On the Magic. So I think activism is always like you're doing the opposite, because when you're doing what everybody else is doing, you don't have as much a voice, because people aren't going to say, I mean, they may ask you, okay, you're all kneeling. Okay, you're kneeling every time. Like, eventually that gets old and you're like, okay, that's fine. Especially when we bring these kinds of things into our jobs, right?
Right.
I think so anyway, our idol, now this other, I mean, he's not a popular basketball player. He's not one that, like, I'm sure his jersey's like, 350 out of how many players? I don't know.
Well, his popularity just went up.
It probably did.
Yeah.
It probably went way up. So
I hadn't heard of him, but I haven't heard of most players.
Right.
Even if I go, the sad thing is, like, that's like, even with like a team like I like the Cubs, I don't really follow it. I like to go for the community and stuff.
So this goes back to something that you and I were talking about before we went on air, and it was a quote that really made me just kind of think a little bit, and I think people should hear it, and that is that our worldviews come into the church all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like how we're going to deal with life always comes in, and we can't, how we understand the world, like, is influenced by the world and its way of being and its way of understanding itself.
And don't delude yourself to think that you're free from this.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you start talking about having a gospel worldview, like one that is driven by Christ, cross, resurrection, and restoration to come, like how, like, what does that look like? I think the thing that made me think of it, just listening to the NBA player and he's offering the gospel and all that, it's like, well, okay, but what does that actually mean? Like, how do I do this? Like, how do I act? I mean, this is how he's deciding to step forward and say, but that's very political.
Right.
In some ways he's like saying, well, you guys who are all kneeling and wearing, the BLM and talking about Black Lives Matters and what's happening, you're doing it in a way that I can't do it.
Uh-huh.
So I'm at some level saying you might be doing it wrong.
Sure. Oh, it is. Like, if I can't participate, I mean, in our climate of, everything's just true for you, it's a lot easier for people to just say, like, well, it's, fine for you, not for me. But generally, that still is saying, if it's not fine for me, like, I don't really probably think it's fine for you either.
Right.
Yeah. Sure.
Which we used to be more comfortable with.
Yes.
We're not so comfortable with it now.
Right. And it is interesting that the tie to this is like, this is how I'm going to respond to the American flag as a Christian.
Right.
That's an interesting layer. Not just like, here's how I'm going to respond to a BLM protest, or here's how I'm going. And the same is true for the Bowers. This is how I respond to the American flag.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this, but do you hear that noise?
Yeah, somebody's definitely like
oh, they're working next door.
I was gonna say they're up on your roof, hammering together.
Yeah.
Some form of I don't know.
They're gonna cut.
There's a protest banner they're putting up on your building.
Yeah. Well, Franklin. No, not Franklin. Oh gosh, not Franklin Graham, but the other Franklin.
Delano Roosevelt.
No, son of a famous philosopher. Why am I blanking his name?
Benjamin Franklin.
He's popular in the 70s. Philosopher.
Franklin.
He has Labrie.
Francis Schaeffer.
Francis Schaeffer. Schaeffer's son came out with a pretty provocative statement.
Oh, okay.
Against Donald Trump, against kind of the whole evangelical movement, and anyway, he was applying his understanding of the gospel to what's happening in the world.
Yes.
And his understanding of the gospel, I think, is actually different than this man's, Johnson Isaac's, standing up his understanding of the gospel, which links back to what you and I did a podcast about last week, which is how can evangelicals be so different in where they're at.
Right. Which I continue to mill that one over.
Well, it's concerning me too, because I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Except that historically, especially if you look at the Reformation,
yes,
you have these figures who disagreed with each other.
Yeah.
And they were on opposite sides and thought people understood the gospel wrong.
Yeah.
But they also had a grace for one another that I don't know if we have. I mean, not always. Sometimes.
Yeah, they also were far more comfortable with conflict. Like
they would write against each other all the time,
vehemently. Yeah. And I think they viewed it as for the sake of the kingdom to disagree with each other vehemently. Where we view, like, if there's any division, it's like we're terrified. We're like, oh my gosh, like we're divided.
Right.
I mean, I feel that way too. But yeah, they didn't have that worry.
No. In fact, there's a story about Whitefield where one of his disciples said, "Well, do you think Wesley will be in heaven?" And Whitefield said, "I don't know, because I think Wesley will be so close to God I won't even be able to see him."
Yeah.
And he would write against Wesley's theology all the time. And they
vehemently disagreed. Yes.
But he had a reverence for his personal relationship with God.
And that's the tension we seem to not be able to strike, is to say, like, yes, like this person is a believer and I wholeheartedly believe it, and then I adamantly disagree with them about this because I think it's destructive.
Right.
And I love them, but it drives me insane when they say this, and I'm going to publish a response. I don't know. Well, it's like we have to. Somebody maybe you were even talking about the Piper and N.T. Wright stuff. Now, I don't know how they feel about each other personally. I have no idea. Right. But I think it's good that they've hashed out stuff over justification. That's not it's helpful for us to look at that. And I hope that they could sit down and, I'm sure Piper would have a Sprite and N.T. Wright would have a beer, right?
Right.
But I would hope that they could do that and laugh about some stuff.
Right. So, if I were to, if you were gone and I'm your friend and your wife were here and she and I began to speculate about you.
Oh, man.
We both have very different relationships with you.
Right.
So if I were to start making assertions about you that she disagreed with, she'd be like, no, I have this relationship and I have this information about Andy that you don't have.
Right.
But it wouldn't actually, I don't think, change the respect that we both have for you and the personal relationship that's separate from one another with you. And we could coexist, I think.
Right.
Even with different opinions about you. And I think that is what I would hope Christianity would be more like in the way that we engage in the public sphere. Where I could say, yeah, look, I think some worldviews and the way you're reading scripture is not the best way, but I honor your relationship with God and I know you know Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I may publicly say, I don't think you're headed the right way, but you still can go do it. It's not like, you can handle whatever political, social thing you want to, but we can pray and break bread together, but we're not.
Well, part of this, and this also alludes back to our previous conversation, but this, utter devotion to there being an absolute right answer to everything and, a rational, we all can find the truth on this. And look, I'm not saying rationalism's wrong. It's probably a helpful corrective to other viewpoints.
Right.
But sometimes, I think we as Christians think we all need, if you haven't arrived at this truth that I have arrived at, you are living in lies. And when two groups think that way, you start doubting each other's salvation over very, historically trivial things. And you start, breaking fellowship with each other because it's like, how do you not see this truth? There it is in the Bible. And the other person's reading the Bible and they're like, I see that differently. And I think somewhere in there, like this is the genius of the old creeds and confessions is they gave you something that was like this. These are the critical things. This is the critical stuff. You need this to be in the church.
Yeah.
And then outside of that,
you got to work it out.
You got to work it out. Yeah. And I think there's something. I'm also concerned because I feel like we don't know when to say enough's enough. Like I can take, we can have these 800 things in common, but when we don't have the 801st, like wow, can't stand each other. And it's like, why not go, wow, we have 800 things in common, and the 801st we disagree on adamantly, and we'll be in community as we hash it through.
Right.
That'd be okay.
That would be better.
That'd be way better.
Well, I think the other thing is I think we've become a labeling society, and then we've upped how many times we can see one another labeling each other.
Yeah.
So you're an alt-right person. You're a social Marxist. You're a,
yes.
You listen to the critical race theory. You're just a litmus test. If you're not anti-abortion and anti-feminism, then you don't belong here. Like we label each other. And when you label each other, you pigeonhole people, and there's no freedom to just be human.
And you miss a ton of nuance that's really in every human heart and viewpoint. Yeah. And the fact that people change. I mean, I've talked about this on here before too. Like this, I remember hearing this study that everybody thinks they've arrived at their viewpoint, and they did this long-term study with people where every 10 years they checked in and found radically different views in these people, but the people still could not project forward and believe that they would change their views again. They always were like, now I've arrived.
Yep.
And then in 10 years they would go, well, okay, I see this differently. And not all of their beliefs changed, but some of them did. And we seem to be just really, we're very always quite sure that we're right now.
Yeah.
That's like a human thing.
There's a wise woman in our church who said recently, I do not, and this is her direct quote, I do not blab my opinion everywhere, because my opinion is very intimate to me, and you don't actually have the privilege of knowing it unless you know me intimately.
That is good.
Because I can't actually change it if I don't keep it to myself. And what she was trying to say is, if I put it everywhere, then you're going to tell me 5 years down the road, well, you said this last time.
Yeah. And
how can you possibly be here? And so I have no freedom to change or grow. And so I have to guard it because it's an intimate thing. It's not something, it's not that I should be giving away to everybody. And I thought, you know what? That's good things that we should be teaching our kids.
Not a bad idea.
That your opinion is it's an intimate part of you. And it should be shared with people who can help you work it out and have their own, and you share them back and forth. So why are we blabbing our opinions?
That's a protest to expressive individualism.
I know.
Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Is this the last Faith Over Breakfast we just had?
Yeah. No, I think this is the kind of conversation I want to have with people. I want to be able to say, here's where I'm at, but I may not. I'm pretty sure I've probably said things on this podcast that contradict what I've said before. And in fact, one view that's changed over time in me is my pacifism. In the last 3 years, what I believe about it, how I think I would actually function in it, has changed, and will continue to change. I think it's not a solidified belief.
Right.
I'm working it out on air in front of everybody, which, I guess I believe everyone is intimately in need of this particular thing. But, I think that's a good thing.
Well, probably one thing we know is that sometimes there's too much of a good thing. So it's time to...
you want to end this, I see.
Time to wrap it up.
All right.
Hey, thanks everybody for... If you made it this far, you really do love us and care about us, and we just want to tell you we love you too.
This can be our number one episode.
Yeah, and thanks for hanging out with us on Faith Over Breakfast.